This is the SF Productions Podcast Network.
Two shows enter January, but neither will leave.
From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. This is our first attempt at a video podcast. You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes, or our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. Links will hopefully appear somewhere down there below.
Or will appear pretty stupid.
Exactly.
So what are we going to talk about today, Mark?
So today we're talking about two shows that we really have enjoyed that are going off the air this month, 30 Rock and Fringe. Are we happy to see them go or not? We'll see.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Starting with 30 Rock. It premiered in 2006.
And it premiered at the same time as Studio 60.
Right, on the Sunset Strip, which was Sorkin's new big production.
Right, and they were both about sketch comedy.
Right.
And so the big question was, could they both survive, or would Aaron Sorkin knock poor Tina Fey right off the network?
And of course, the opposite really happened. That Sunset Strip didn't last, I don't think it lasted a whole season. So, in any case, 30 Rock was produced by Broadway Video, which is Lorne Michaels' production company. He also produced, other than obviously SNL, he produced Kids in the Hall, and the late night shows, Conan's original show, Jimmy Fallon's current show, and the sitcom Up All Night, which is having its own problems right now.
It's getting revamped yet again.
Yes. And this is basically a vehicle for Tina Fey, of course, was in the SNL cast, and also was the head writer. And it's all about Liz Lemon, who's a head writer at an NBC sketch show. Wonder where they got that idea. And her new boss, Jack Donaghy, Alec Baldwin, who's the head of East Coast Television and Microwave Oven Programming.
Which is a title that makes about as much sense as normal titles do.
Right. And so he brings in Tracy Jordan, played by Tracy Morgan, and basically takes over the show.
To be the star of the show, as opposed to the blonde girl who was the star
Jenna.
of the show.
And so the big point of the show is how Liz's life is out of control. She has no personal life. She has to deal with this insane talent and idiotic writers. And over time, Liz and Jack really become the main characters of the show. There was a great deal of stunt casting that went on.
A lot of it with Liz's boyfriends, and
Right.
some of it was really good. Matt Damon.
John Hamm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So there was a lot of overarching stories on the show. You had Liz's attempts at love. She finally got married in 2012.
To Chris, without an H.
Yes. And also Jack's quest to move up to CEO, first at General Electric, and then later at Cabletown, which of course was their parody of Comcast.
I really do love how they did the CEOs of GE
Right.
and Cabletown.
Cabletown.
Those were really great.
And throughout the series, they really made fun of NBC. At one point, Jack decided he was going to purposely make bad shows, and that was the explanation as to why NBC, until at least recently, was number 4 in the ratings in real life, was because Jack was purposely making terrible shows.
Yes, but some of the terrible shows actually looked pretty good.
Yeah. And we also saw Tracy move up and down the celebrity ladder.
And the show also reflected a lot of Tracy's real-life situations when he had the racial outburst and things like that. They were always reflected in the show.
Yeah. The show won 14 Emmys, at least so far. I'm assuming they're going to get another one because you always see that at the Emmys, the last year a show's on the air. They're like, oh, it's our last chance, so they'll give them more awards. Although I really do think the show has pretty much run its course. They've done as much with the characters as they were likely to do.
Yeah. I can't see that they would do much more. And Alec Baldwin seems to really want to leave.
Right. Now, the final episode's going to be on January 31st. It's an hour-long episode. The show is available on Hulu. I think it's actually Hulu Plus to see more of the show.
Probably.
And that's the whole Hulu Plus deal. So, all right. So, let's talk about Fringe. And that premiered in 2008, and that was produced by J.J. Abrams, who produced a ton of stuff. Alias, Lost, Person of Interest, the Mission Impossible franchise, the revamped Star Trek franchise.
And most of the stuff you see that he did does have these overarching mythologies.
Absolutely. And so the show's concept really started as an X-Files clone, kind of Monster of the Week type thing.
And I liked that. I missed that.
Right. Over time, they really moved more to a mythology basis for the series. It starts with the FBI coming up against what they call a fringe event, something they can't explain, they don't know what to do with, and they assign Agent Olivia Dunham to the case. She finds there's this mad scientist who can help. This mad scientist, Walter Bishop, who's actually mad. They find him in a sanitarium. They have to convince his son Peter to get him out. There's an FBI agent, Astrid Farnsworth, who kind of becomes Walter's assistant / caretaker in a way. And the Fringe Division is formed within the FBI to handle these weird cases. So they had mythology elements from the very beginning, kind of in the background, but at the end of the first season, that's when it went total mythology and moved away from Monster of the Week.
And I really think that there were several things that happened in the first season that they could have gone back to rather than going the way they did now.
Right.
The whole thing with Olivia's first boyfriend who died, and the German guy, and some other things. I never felt like they resolved those very well.
Not really. So, in the series, we explore parallel universes. We see different events in their personal histories. We learn how Walter created a series of events that ended up creating these fringe events in the first place. There's a whole Peter and Olivia, will they or won't they thing that goes on. At one point, there's a whole season that goes back and forth between the two universes.
And I have to say, that was the best credit sequences ever when they did that, because they changed the credit sequences depending upon what universe they were in.
Right. And I love some of the stuff. You see this parallel universe where things are similar but not exactly the same. There's a hit Broadway musical called Dogs. You know, we learn that Peter, in that one universe at one point, was a comic book fan, and
there was really Red Lantern, not Green Lantern.
Green Lantern, yeah. So a lot of really cool little, tweaks of things. But the last season goes into this dystopian future, and they end up as freedom fighters.
It really reminded me a lot of what they did with Dollhouse.
Yeah, and it really went kind of off the tracks at that point.
Yeah.
It's still a good show, but it's not nearly as good as it was.
Well, I really think that they made a mistake when they went away from this Monster of the Week idea, because when you were doing that, you got fans of the science fiction part, but you also got the people who like that sort of episodic television that's really reminiscent of Law and Order episode, where it's all self-contained and you have a story of the week and you don't have to follow along. I like those shows, and when they go to this mythology, if you don't watch it all, if you miss one episode, if you get behind, it's hard to catch up.
Right. You pretty much have to start at the beginning of the series if you're going to watch it. It's available on Hulu. The last episode is January 18th. As we tape this, there's only 2 more episodes left, I believe. There's a regular episode, and then I believe there's going to be a 2-hour final episode. This may possibly continue as a DC comic. DC did a kind of spin-off comic book miniseries that came out of the Fringe series.
And there have been a number of other successes where TV shows have continued as comic books.
Right. So, 2 series going off the air. Always new stuff coming on, and there's always new stuff, and you can always go back and watch either of these series and a whole bunch of other stuff on
Hulu,
all over
Hulu
the
Plus.
net.
It'll probably be available on Netflix.
Sure.
But in the meantime, you can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. And from the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark, and thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye-bye.